So hey everyone, so today I've got a very interesting guest on the chat today. I'm quite sure some of you may know he predates Lady Gaga, our friend at Storage Gaga, and yeah, so I had Chin-Fah with me today, and we're gonna talk a little bit about his new exciting venture. So yeah, Chin-Fah, why not you just go ahead and give us a brief intro, man?
All right. Thanks. Thanks, Charles. Thanks for having me. Um, well, some of you might know me. My name is Chin-Fah, but it's actually nothing to do with storage, Lady Gaga. It actually started with Radio Gaga, Queen Star.
Oh, so you're even way before that, man. You know,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
funny because when I first came on it, it's like, hey, did he just hijack the damn Lady Gaga from somewhere? But you know, it's like cannot be. You know, it's been a while, so it really
Uh-huh.
predates that. So yeah, now
Yeah.
that you mention it, oh okay.
Radio Gaga. Actually, how the idea came about was I was in the car in 2011. I think it was July, if I'm not wrong.
Mm.
And the song was playing. I said, damn, I should go and start a blog. And that was it, right? So that was the name of the storage Gaga thing. That's how it came about.
Very
Anyway,
nice.
yeah. So I started with iXsystems as the general business manager for Asia Pacific that covers anything from Japan all the way to some parts of Middle East. Yeah, so pretty excited about the whole thing, because I've been doing this for quite a few years with the ZFS file system, with the Open Solaris, now with FreeBSD, and FreeNAS and the TrueNAS and so on. Yeah, very, very excited to be here.
Cool, man. And obviously with iXsystems generally is very synonymous with FreeNAS, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
as we all know it. So I think there's I mean at least myself as well. I mean it took me a while to understand how where FreeNAS was, what TrueNAS is, and how does iXsystem play in a larger ecosystem of things. So just wondering if you could share a little bit with us.
So the FreeNAS thing came about, I think probably back in 2009, but the real deal actually came about when, I think it's just genius masterstroke, where you actually started to combine the FreeBSD core, the kernel, the distribution around it, with the OpenZFS file system. And that was in 2015. 2015 is when, version 9.1 came out for FreeNAS. And of course, they let everyone have it for free, right? So today you can actually consider it as the most downloaded open source storage OS out there. And the beauty about this is you can just download it and use it immediately to that effect. All right, you don't have to go and do a lot of coding or whatever things that you got to assemble, right? It just works. All right, so the same code itself, all right, has been transforming. And as of version 12.0, the FreeNAS will be rebranded as TrueNAS Core, right? And the TrueNAS that is existing today will be TrueNAS Enterprise. And just a couple of days ago, they just released the testing of the TrueNAS scale, which is actually coming next year. And that will be a very interesting one. But again, the entire kernel, the entire foundation around it is actually just the same old TrueNAS itself,
So
right?
basically, what I'm hearing is that FreeNAS, which was the community product, will become what's known as TrueNAS Core, and
Mm-hmm.
then there is TrueNAS, the paid version, which is TrueNAS Enterprise, and TrueNAS Scale is going to be like I assuming by the name, a scale-out file system of sorts,
Yep.
and along
Yep.
those lines.
Yep. Around that line. So it's going to be codenamed Angelfish.
Ah, nice, nice. So I'm just curious. For those who are not aware, obviously the community version and the enterprise version. So I understand you said same base and everything else, right? I mean,
Mhm.
from a feature function perspective, is there a gap or there's some things that enterprise specifically has, or is it just support?
Well, there is definitely a few little unique things. In fact, if you look at the feature set, TrueNAS Core or FreeNAS actually have more features than TrueNAS Enterprise. That's because of the plugin architecture itself, which can support a whole bunch of things like Plex and, things like Asigra, things like, the synchronization software, Bacula, and so on and so forth. So TrueNAS Core or FreeNAS actually has more features.
Mm.
Of course, as you actually grow and mature into more of an enterprise and production ready kind of thing, besides the support, which has multiple levels, of course, all right, you still have the HA part, which is actually doing dual controllers. So those are the key things that probably more meant for the enterprise.
Got it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think a lot of people are aware that, I mean, obviously as a product, FreeNAS has always been software only. So
Mm-hmm.
I understand you guys have some form of hardware as well. And I mean, with obviously the enterprise offering. So I guess the question comes, is it possible to then still do that whole software approach, with the enterprise, or, must get hardware from you guys, or how does it play out?
So in TrueNAS Enterprise or the existing TrueNAS itself, it comes in the appliance form, which means it's actually a software and the hardware. Mm-hmm. And the uniqueness of this is it allows you to basically have an optimized system, right? The whole idea of why people choose iPhones over the other brands, or the whole idea of why people choose Tesla over the other cars, is really the entire, hardware and software integration, the whole true experience itself. So that's where it's actually very critical for, enterprise customers to actually get that kind of customer experience.
Mm. So, I mean, obviously, as the name suggests, it's obviously a NAS, right? I mean, from a use case perspective in the enterprise, do you guys see yourself very uniquely positioned for a certain use case? Or, how do you kind of, I mean, obviously there's a lot of NAS space in the market, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how do you see iXsystems coming into ASEAN specifically, right? And, having a nice differentiator in this very...
There's a bit of a misnomer because of the NAS thing, right? We
Right.
actually do iSCSI and fiber channel.
Wow. Okay. I mean, iSCSI, I think I know,
Yeah,
but
okay.
fiber channel, okay.
Yes,
Interesting.
it does. All right. So the M series itself actually supports Gen 6 fiber channel.
Wow. Okay. So
Okay.
so you're saying the appliance has got FC ports, and then you hook it up and...
Exactly. All right. So the name itself actually probably does it a bit of a great disservice, right?
Yeah,
Anyway,
it is a bit of a disservice. I mean, the whole TrueNAS discussion point is like, hey, it's a NAS, and I guess because I mean, to a lot of the techies who build their own labs, FreeNAS has always been the de facto. If I want a quick and dirty NAS, it's just up, right, and there's a free one. So wow, okay, interesting.
So iSCSI is definitely there. Of course, fiber channel is there as well, and so on and so forth. So that's where the misnomer comes in, right? But the thing is, if you look at it from the ASEAN perspective, there is actually a lot of people who downloaded FreeNAS and use it, and they use it in production as well. All right. So the challenge right now is because IX hasn't been really present in the ASEAN or even the Asia Pacific market that much yet, because they've been focused so much in the US. Well, it's a good thing that I think the timing is couldn't be more perfect. Pardon the so-called impression about the COVID-19 and so on. But the demands of this is people trying to see, why they should actually basically promote themselves from a FreeNAS perspective into the TrueNAS kind of realm. You see, this is actually quite critical because as businesses look through it, right, they can't just keep using FreeNAS itself. Of course, they can use it and use it production, right? But at some point, in order for the business to thrive and grow, you do need to look at the TrueNAS experience itself.
So it's interesting that you brought up COVID and the pandemic and everything else, right? So I mean, I was wondering if you can elaborate a little bit because, I think you mentioned, how FreeNAS potentially, can expand use cases and whatnot, in businesses today. So are you kind of seeing it as potentially, hey, you know what, it's a good use case? I mean, in the whole pandemic scenario that, hey, customers, you may be able to, whatever that you really set up, expand that use case. Is that where you're kind of getting at, or?
Oh, there's a few things itself, right? If you look at the entire offering that's actually brought by the iXsystems, they have everything from what we call the TrueNAS minis, the very small scale one, all the way up to the highest appliance, which is the M60 itself, right? So you do get a lot of home users now actually looking into the TrueNAS minis. The TrueNAS minis will be a small scale desktop kind of environment where you can actually support up to 64 terabytes. So we see a very big spike in demand for that, right? But at the same time, we're also seeing people who have been using FreeNAS itself looking to elevate it and say that, hey, we can't keep running this, right? Because at some point, we need to have reliability, we need to have performance, all right? And we can't actually just craft it out, using the x86 super micros or the Quantas and so on. So that's where we see that businesses are actually saying that in order for us to grow, And of course, with this new norm situation that we are facing now, we have to have a reliable and high performance system. And that's where you see the demand for the TrueNAS appliances as well.
So assuming, I mean, just hypothetical, all right? If let's say a customer already, like to your point, right, running production with FreeNAS, is there like a migration strategy or path that they can, hey, you know what, tomorrow I pay you support, and then it just moves to TrueNAS equivalent, so to speak, or do they still need to kind of go certified hardware, blah blah blah, that kind of.
Okay, so there are a few paths you can actually look at. One of the cool thing about ZFS is you can always export the pool and then actually import the pool somewhere else, so nothing changes itself.
Okay.
But of course, that would mean that you have to use your existing hard disk. So we do have systems like the TrueNAS Minis or the FreeNAS certified servers that comes from us, where you actually can just buy a diskless system, all right, export the so-called pool from the older x86, and then just plug it in and re-import them again. So that would actually mean that there's actually a clear migration path from whatever that they have been using in the DIY situation more into the enterprise and supported versions.
So you're saying that you could buy a diskless base chassis and then you just extract the drives and just plug it back, and then you should be able to import back. Oh, very nice.
In some models, right? We're not going to say to work on the M series or the X series itself. We just make that a true experience. And we don't want things to, you can't like use a consumer drives and plug it into an enterprise system, right?
Fair.
Doing that. Right? But in some systems, yes, it can be done.
Very good. I think it leads me to the next discussion point, which is ZFS, right? Everybody's favorite file system. I mean, right. I've had my fair shares of ups and downs with ZFS. I mean, of course, ZFS was. If I were to be very objective about ZFS, I think ZFS was ahead of its time when it was launched back in the day. But I mean, obviously there were some bad implementations of it, and it's good. So I just want to kind of get a thought on it. I know you're very passionate about this topic, so you know what? Yeah.
Yeah, of course. All right. So of course, yeah, you're right. It's ahead of its time, and I think it still is. If you look at it, the whole so-called file systems in the market, nobody is doing 128-bit. This is probably the only one that's doing 128-bit.
Yeah.
Right. And the way it actually being architected with the Uber blocks and the Ditto blocks, as we call them itself, right? There's a lot of, or even one of the things that's been always written and spoken about is actually the checksum itself, the end-to-end checksum. So this part itself lends to what we call self-healing. All right. Of course, it probably is a slightly over-marketed word. You won't self-heal every single thing, but we see that maybe 50 to 60% of the situation when it occurs, there will be self-healing capabilities as well. So this is something that is pretty cool, the way we see it. So
yeah, self-healing has always been ZFS claim to fame, right? I mean, I've never thought too much about it. But I mean, in your opinion, right? I mean, is self-healing something that I would say key differentiator so for ZFS? I mean, because obviously, we talk a lot about self-healing in object storage generally, right?
Yeah.
But it's less so in your enterprise file systems and whatnot. So yeah.
Yeah, it is definitely a feature because in the past, before I have been part of iX, I've been doing this ZFS from the Open Solaris days back in probably 2011, 2012. Right, it does make a big difference, especially when you're doing things like video production house, for example, 3D animation. When you have file system that is actually unable to cater for bit rots, simple little corruptions and so on. The self-healing helps. I've actually seen customers using some of the other branded ones, right? All of a sudden you see the movie, hey, there's a little dot there that's like something is not right. Right? We can see that, ZFS actually does help tremendously, especially in those kind of use cases.
This is all automatic, right? There's no that process or like a housekeeping exercise that you need to run, right? I mean, it's just built as part of the file system that does
it. Correct. And the cool thing about this is, a lot of the ZFS file systems that's out there, Oracle involved, FreeNAS involved, and so on and so forth, they do all these things automatically. They do disk scrubs, all right? They actually do either daily checksums or weekly checksums. So all these things actually lends itself to a very high enterprise system.
Okay. So I also know one of the interesting features that the iXsystems can do is host VMs on that storage slash NAS box. You want to talk a little bit to that?
Well, it always has been there, all right? It's part of what we call the Beehive hypervisor, all right? It's nothing fantastic to say, of course, compared to VMware. VMware is a very rich, a feature-rich kind of environment. But in a simple setup where people don't want to invest into a complicated hypervisor, yes, it's always been there. You always can actually run a few VMs inside the FreeNAS box itself or the TrueNAS box itself.
Yeah, I see these are very good use cases for like edge use cases. I mean, let's say smaller businesses. I mean, like I said, we're talking a lot edge computing these days, right? Bringing so to speak the data center closer to the edge. I think that might be one of those use cases. Or is there any other use cases that you guys are looking at, or it's kind of we're down the same thought process there?
Edge is actually coming into the picture, with the recent launch of the TrueNAS minis and also the M60. Edge is actually a messaging that we are also putting up there. But all the while, we have seen a lot of small little mom and pop shops, the SMBs itself, that's actually been using that to run multiple applications of theirs.
Oh, okay. Is there an additional license for that, or is just pretty much just, hey, part of the box and you?
It's free. It's completely free, right?
So pretty much, if you buy a really, really big box with heaps of compute, and I'm assuming you can just run to your heart's content until it kind of exhausts itself.
Yeah, correct. But we try to be less flashy about it. We're not pushing the VMware part or the VM part itself.
I mean, it's a nice option to have. I mean, like to your point earlier, right? In this challenging times, people are a little bit more cost conscious, and if let's say I didn't have to invest unnecessarily on certain things, I mean, this may be an option. So definitely, yeah.
Well, there's a lot of things. I mean, if you look at furthermore into that, what we call the plugin architecture itself, the plugins itself or the jails, right? Jails is actually like a FreeBSD version of containers. That has been around for a long time. So when it actually leverages on the jails technology, we've seen a lot of vendors building plugins into it. We have Jenkins as a plugin, we have Asigra as a plugin, we have Iconic as a plugin for media management. So we have probably about 20 plus plugins that you can actually use to actually extend the capability of the TrueNAS itself.
Okay. So, I mean, it's funny that you mentioned containers. I mean, today, not a day goes by, in my inbox didn't have a discussion about containers. So let's dive a little bit into that. So what's the iXsystems take on containers? I mean, is that something that today, hey, you know what, already we are all there, we are ready to go, we can present an NFS mount point, you all can do to your heart's content, or what's the goal?
So today, if you look at what the so-called containers that we are building, all right, it's really about TrueNAS Scale itself. Because from when TrueNAS Scale launches next year, all right, it's going to be containers on top of TrueNAS OS itself. All right, so from there you can actually build a lot of applications, scale into a scale out. At the same time, you can also position it as a hyper converged system as well. So you can work with a single node, with a dual node, and multiple nodes.
Hyper converge. How does that tie in with iXsystems? I mean, I'm just in my very naive way had always seen it as a storage vendor, so to speak, right? I mean, is there a flavor of hyperconverge that you guys do? Or, I mean, yeah, you kind of run a hypervisor on it. So, yeah, how does that work? I mean...
So I can't, first divulge too much about what's happening there.
Okay.
When this code name that I call Angelfish is actually coming out very soon. It's being beta tested right now. So basically, it runs the Zen hypervisor.
Okay.
And from the hypervisor itself, it works with a few Linux distro, and from there you can actually run a cluster on top of it as well. So that's how it's going to be built.
So, nice. So it's going to be a slight deviation from ZFS?
Well, the foundation itself is still going to be ZFS, right? Because ultimately you need a very resilient file system underneath it. So it will still be the core of FreeBSD and OpenZFS, all right? But on top of it, on top of the Zen hypervisor, you'll be looking at Debian as well as cluster. That's how it's going to scale.
Are we expecting it to be late this year, or is it next year kind of thing?
It's going to be middle of next year, probably second half. All right, there's still going to be a lot of things going on right now.
Ooh, this is exciting.
Yeah, it is.
Gluster is a very exciting, or a very, I would say exciting, I would say a very, very interesting implementation of how distributed file systems should be and the distributed storage should be. So yeah, definitely something to look out for.
Yeah.
So from a competitive landscape, not too sure how much you can comment on this. Again, not just NAS, just in general storage, right? There's so many storage vendors, right? From your big boy play at Hitachi, Dell EMC, right down to your small timer, the QNAP Synologies, or I mean, even I think Promise, and then there's somewhere in the middle there's NetApp, So where do you kind of sit on that spectrum of things? I mean, just out of curiosity, because I think pardon the ignorance, because a lot of people has this perception that FreeNAS has always been an open source project, right? Yep. And then yes, obviously there's iXsystems that productize this and make it more an enterprise product. But I've never quite understood where in the spectrum of things where do you guys see yourself from a positioning standpoint?
From a TrueNAS enterprise perspective, we are actually coming into from the mid to the high end kind of perspective, right? Of course, it's a brand that's not very well known because we have been very conservative, all right, for many, many years. In fact, the company is coming to 30 years old next year.
Wow.
Can you imagine?
That I didn't know.
All right, started in 1991.
Because I always thought it was like yes, it was a community project, right? And the prioritization only happened not too long ago. But I didn't know it was 30 years. Okay.
All right, but it always has been what we call the main developer or the core developer of the FreeBSD file system. It has been the FreeBSD OS, right? It's the custodian, it's actually the steward of this project itself. But when actually it started to take on the OpenZFS in 2015, it also started to become a main contributor to both the file system as well as the FreeNAS movement. So right now is definitely the custodian as well as the steward, for the FreeBSD project. The FreeNAS project.
So it's interesting because I also know as a fact that the amount of people that contributes to build this FreeNAS code is also one of the strengths of that product as well. Because there's a lot of NAS equivalents that are free, which we'll talk about a bit. But this one is one of the most well supported one. Can I say that?
Yes, it is. I mean, if you look at it from so-called open source project perspective, all right, of course, the most famous one is Linux. If you look from a Linux point of view, but if you look at the Linux itself, Linux is just a kernel. There's a lot of companies that build distros around it.
Yes.
All right. The Red Hats, the SUSE, the Ubuntu's, and so on. But FreeBSD is an entire OS, the core kernel itself, and everything around it is actually being so-called managed and developed by one single source. All right. So in this case, that's where you can see the strong cohesion, the strong integrity, the strong integration with everything that it builds around it. So this is one part that lends to its stability. Right, FreeBSD used to be one of the most stable OS. Remember, like probably in the 90s, we used to look at this website called Uptime. And we see, where's the server that's been running the longest, and FreeBSD is always in the top 5 or top 10. You see, that's why it's actually extremely stable as an operating system. Nice. So the integration with OpenZFS is fantastic. In fact, the summit is coming up in about a month's time, October 6 and 7 next month.
Oh, so what summit is this? Sorry, the
OpenZFS Summit 2020.
Okay. I'm assuming it's a virtual event that everybody can attend.
Yes, it is. Yeah, it's virtual event, but it's the 7th one, all right, since 2013. So there's a lot of growth and things that are happening.
I'll probably mark down a date for that. If I could kind of make it, I'll be interested to kind of join in.
Sure, I'll definitely be there.
So, I mean, just kind of wrap it up, I just want to touch a little bit closer to home. With a lot of the chats, I think I'm very much, as you may know, I'm more ASEAN focused, right? And I also want to I want to get your thoughts about, some of your trends that you are seeing with your discussion with customers and partners and everybody. What do you see from a storage perspective? I mean, I think you're the best person to talk about this, right? I mean, so from a trend perspective, we obviously adopt storage and technology a lot different compared to our friends in the US and the EMEA and whatnot. So yeah, just to get your thoughts on that.
I think from a storage perspective, there's still a lot of what we call perception. A couple of years ago, somebody called me a storage dinosaur. and, and I didn't get offended. In fact, I was actually quite proud of it, because no matter how you look at storage itself, right, the foundational points itself doesn't change. All right, whether you're actually putting it on premises or you're looking into the cloud, how you design storage doesn't change that much. But the consumption itself, I think from an ASEAN perspective, we really need to set a lot of awareness, because I'm not too sure, your experiences, but my experiences is there's still a lot of people that require spoon feeding. All right, we still think that people should do a bit more research. I mean, compared to other countries that I'm now involved in, or in the US or in the Europe, people actually do their homework. People actually spend the time to understand the differences between the technology and how it actually look at. Here it's pretty much hearsay, right? So that's always a challenge.
Yeah. So do you attribute it to, the lack of footprint size per se? Because I mean, obviously, with my discussion points with product teams and whatnot, generally it's like, they are small, it's our medium size, sometimes large, and likewise, they are large, it's like to us non-existent in some form or shape in our region. So I think that has something to do with it. I mean, at least from my point of view. So yeah.
I'm not too sure, but I think it has something to probably much deeper than that. It's probably our culture as well, and how we consume things. A lot of times we've been told to actually just absorb rather than to question. All right. So this is some part that I think should change. All right. We should go and be more inquisitive, be more, busybody to find out, to be curious, right? Because without that kind of traits, right, we are always in that consumption mode, not the innovating mode.
I think generally in ASEAN, we are a little bit more conservative, is probably the word. I think we tend to go with the tried and tested, and we are a little bit less adventurous when it comes to, hey, here's a, net new approach to the problem, right? I mean, I remember the early days of HCI, I mean, myself included, right? So I remember not too long ago, actually now quite long ago, somebody came to me in, I was still working in traditional storage back then, came to me and said, hey, I just joined this new tech company. Back then was Nutanix, right? And he came to me and said, hey, do you want to join, me, I'm looking for SE back then, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, in the back of my head, it's like, how is a server with some drives ever going to replace this monolithic storage of 1,000 drives where you spend $1 million on, right? And, I couldn't be more wrong. I mean, I'm not saying that it's completely taken over the world, but definitely it's a massive threat to the large install base that we see. And I think, I mean, even having said that, the big boy storage are also kind of slowly transitioning to be a little bit more software-centric, if you like.
Yeah, you're right. Actually, a lot of people are very afraid of disruption, all right? Yeah. Because as long as my job is safe and my seat is comfortable, I won't do anything much about it, right? So that's what it is.
Yeah. But do you think so? It's a more storage-centric thing of all the, I mean, there's many tiers of technology, obviously, there's network and compute and everything else. But I mean, maybe I'm just very one-sided view, and I'm looking at it from a storage perspective, but I always feel that storage guys are the hardest to convince in many ways. I don't know whether that's because there's more at stake or what it is, but it just seems to be the case.
I think it is. I think, at least, again, I'm probably biased, right?
Yeah.
But there's so much gravity in the data itself, and it sits into the storage, and storage is probably the last piece that if anything messes up, right, that's the part that everybody has to be, very, very conscious about. So yeah, we always look at storage as the most important piece in the whole infrastructure.
Very good, very good.
Mhm.
Hey, you know what? It's been honor and pleasure to have a chat with you today. I really appreciate it. I know we all kind of busy, stuck in the Zoom sessions. So I really appreciate you taking some time out.
Thank you.
Having a chat. So we definitely got to do this a little bit more often. I know there's so many things that I want to tap your brain on with regards to the storage and everything else, the landscape of it. But yeah, I mean, I appreciate your time today, and I hope you every success in your new venture in iXsystems.
All right, much appreciated.
All
Thanks for
right,
your time.
man. Thanks, Chin-Fah.
Okay, bye.
Cheers.